Recently, I headed down to London, the nation's capital for WWE Money in the Bank. And of course, while I was in London, there was only one thing to do, and that was visit 3 more CEX stores in this, the crazy world of CEX. Welcome to my continuing mission to visit every CEX store in the entire world. From the weird to the wonderful, the big to the small, I am here to visit them all. This is the crazy world of CEX. Again, folks, so welcome back to the crazy world of CEX. My continuing adventure to try and visit every single CEX store in the entire world and along the way to build an absolutely amazing game collection. And this time, once again, we are back in London. That's because recently I went down for both WWE SmackDown and WWE Money in the Bank. And while I was there, it was rude not to hit up as many CEX stores as possible. One of the best things about going to London is seeing how many CEX stores I can hit up in one day. Now, unfortunately, this time I didn't do as well as I did last time in a previous episode of the Crazy World of CEX. That's because some of the stores in this area were just very difficult to get to tube-wise, and sadly a little bit far apart. But don't worry, we again are back with 3 brand new CEX stores, and of course finishing up in my local CEX store here in the city of Norwich. Just before we get into the video, I remind you folks, if you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and please subscribe, as I put new videos out every Saturday live at 5, as well as bonus content for the week, and I really want you folks along for the ride. Now, down to London. We are starting this episode of the crazy world of CEX in Stratford, as we arrived at Stratford train station for our trip to London. And just across the road from Stratford train station is the Stratford Centre, a very small mall, and hiding at the back of this mall is what we are looking for in the crazy world of CEX. It is our first CEX store. Whenever I visit a brand new CEX store, one of the first places I always check is the window, as you would expect this is where they would have the very best stock that the shop has to offer. But first impressions were not great of this store here in Stratford, like Xbox 360, Wii, some Call of Duty, PlayStation 5s. At the moment there was nothing that was blowing me away, but yeah, that's the thing about the crazy world of CEX. You never know what is going to be in store, and fingers crossed, in-store is going to be a little bit more exciting than, to be honest, this slightly disappointing window display. So from the outside, this CEX store actually looks really small, but inside it is pretty girthy. Like, this is a fairly sizable CEX store. Even though it only has 1 floor, it has a lot of shelves, a very large floor space, and hopefully some really cool items I can add to the collection. So there's only one thing left to do, and that is to get stuck in and see what treasures we can find. And one of the best places to look for these treasures is of course the glass cabinet of dreams. And jumping in here, you can see there's some PlayStation games and some Dreamcast games, and yes, some Platinum PlayStation games. Now, unfortunately, I do already have all of these for my PlayStation Platinum project, except of course Silent Hill, but that is a £70 game. This Dreamcast was a little bit faded, and I don't think it's very obvious in this video, but that PlayStation controller is also really faded. God of War collection for the PlayStation 3 is a game which is getting surprisingly expensive, and there was a fairly decent selection of loose retro games in here. Normally at the moment when I'm looking for N64 and SNES games, I am looking for boxed and complete games. Yes, I know these are getting harder to find, but if you get a good conditioned boxed N64 or SNES game in CEX for the price, you can get some absolute bargains. And sadly, all of these were kind of the lower level loose games this time, so I did pass on them. But here is something I don't think I've ever seen before: an Atari Jaguar multi-tap. Very cool item, and something I myself have never seen. Couple more retro games here, and I have been looking to build my NES collection a little bit more, but there's nothing I really wanted here. There was a few box retro bits, but for the condition I did pass. I have never seen this Xbox 360 controller before, an official controller with a Halo design. I did pass, but if you know anything else about this controller, please let me know in the comments down below. Speaking of the Xbox, the first section we are hunting in today is the OG Xbox section. And this is a section which I think across the board is getting smaller in CEX stores. And this is a console that I've collected for years. It's one of the very first consoles I went super hardcore on. So I have nearly 500 OG Xbox games in my collection. But it's just paramount to how good a console this was. There's still games to this day that I'm finding I need for the collection. Not just games that I want for the collection, games that I physically need for the collection. And while there was a really good selection of OG Xbox games here, there was only one game that I needed for the collection, and it is this game, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. And it's one that's getting more expensive, but it is without a doubt one of, if not quite possibly, the greatest beat-em-up of all time, and a game I've been sorely missing in my collection, and maybe time to pick it up. Much like my OG Xbox collection, I was lucky enough to amass most of my GameCube collection in previous years when prices have been cheaper, and I do think, as a trend, GameCube games are getting more expensive, such as the heavy hitter games, the games that people want, your kind of Marios, your Zeldas. While I picked them up when they're around the £20 to £30 mark, a lot of these games are around the £40 to £50 mark. Don't get me wrong, there's still some really affordable cheap games you can pick up for the GameCube, but I think games like this are definitely going to go up in price in the coming years, much like the Wii U. At the moment, CEX stores do seem to have a reasonable selection of Wii U games, but it seems every month the Wii U section in most CEX stores is getting smaller. And mark my words, I think now is the time to buy these Wii U games, as I think in coming years these are going to get very expensive and very much in demand by game collectors, so grab them now. Heading over to the Xbox One, and it seems now more than ever is a great time to collect for the Xbox One, as there's some absolute bargains to be had. I'm guessing a lot of people are probably selling up their collection, either moving on to digital consoles or just moving on to Xbox Series X games, but this is great if you're a physical collector like myself. There's some real bargains to be had. It just seems to be a great time to be a game collector for some of these newer retro consoles as such. Like, you can still get some absolute bargains on the Xbox 360, such as the absolutely iconic, beautiful Katamari, but it's games like this which I think are going to get more expensive in the years to come, and now it's just a great time to buy Xbox 360 games, as it just seems every time I go into CEX, these sections sadly get smaller. Even though I've been collecting for the Xbox 360 since its very launch, there's still games that I've never seen before, and this is one of them. So let me know in the comments down below, is this a game I'm missing out of? It is just under £30, so let me know, is it rare? Comment below. Moving on from the Xbox to the PlayStation 3, and a lot of you have commented that I don't really look at the PlayStation 3 section all too often. This is because more often than not, unfortunately, I don't see that many PlayStation 3 games that interest me in my local CEX stores. I think it's definitely harder to find some of the more niche or rarer PlayStation 3 games. They just don't seem to be in CEX very often, and much like my Xbox 360 collection, I picked up a lot of these games I needed a long while ago, but never say never. It's always good to look through these sections in case there's something you haven't seen before. Like, I have seen this game before, but I never played it because it got bad reviews. But let me know if you would pick up the Golden Axe Beast Rider game. And a franchise I really enjoy is the Ratchet and Clank games. I'm definitely missing a few of those. And to be honest, maybe now is the best time to kind of fill these gaps in my PlayStation 3 collection, because much like the Xbox 360, it's super cheap to collect for at the moment. So, you know, maybe this is a good time to kind of get the games I am missing from my PlayStation 3. But let me know what you do in the comments down below. Moving on from the PlayStation 3 to the PlayStation 4, and if you never played the Aladdin and Lion King games back in the day, this is a fantastic way to check out two of the most crushingly hard platform games of all time. Like, seriously, if you think some of these Dark Souls and Cuphead games are hard now, those two are games still to this day I don't think I've ever completed, especially The Lion King is brutally hard. Now here is something I've never seen in a CEX store, the latest releases section. And yes, there's some PlayStation 5 games in there, some slightly older PlayStation 4 games, and then we're kind of, some of these I question if these are the latest releases, but let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Sticking with the PlayStation 5, and there is some real bargains to find on this console. It may be the most recent console, but you can still get some incredible finds, like this game, Jurassic World Evolution 2, an absolutely fantastic game, but the physical copy of this has just got so cheap because I think it was on PlayStation Plus recently. Definitely worth a tenner. Here we have our final find in this Stratford store. This game here, Endzone, A World Apart for the PlayStation 5. It's like a post-apocalyptic kind of strategy game, and I don't really know a lot about this, but £5 for a PlayStation 5 game, I don't think you can go wrong. It may be terrible. Let me know in the comments down below. Next up on the crazy world of CEX, we were off to the Brixton branch of CEX, and let's just get this out of the way now. This is one of the worst glass cabinets of dreams I've ever seen. There was literally no retro. I don't know if they had been hiding the retro downstairs at one point, but that was now blocked off. There was still a Blu-ray and DVD section, but from the off, this was not looking great. You know, I'm expecting to see at least like a couple of N64 games, maybe a PlayStation 1 game or two, but on the outside and inside the glass cabinet of dreams, it looked like no retro. Undeterred though by the lack of retro, I decided to hit up the PlayStation 3 section, and straight away a game that jumped out with me was Alice Madness Returns, and this is a game which is getting more and more expensive. I recently picked this up on the Xbox 360, so I did pass on the PlayStation 3 version. It's surprising how many PlayStation Move exclusive games there are, even though, let's be honest, a lot of these aren't exactly great, but this is the thing with a lot of these Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 sections. You're going to see a lot of the filler titles. Games are released on both consoles, and mainly now is a great time to try and pick up the PlayStation 3 exclusives, and that's what I'm trying to find here, because with any consoles, it's exclusives that get more expensive. I was quite tempted by the Fast and Furious games. I've been watching the films from the start again and absolutely loving them, but unfortunately I didn't really find too much in the PlayStation 3 section here in Brixton. Except for this game, I was very tempted to pick up Persona just because it was complete in really nice condition with the soundtrack CD. I did pass this time because I think it's more the PS2 Persona games that hold their value a little bit more, but let me know if I missed out on this one. It was complete. Should I have picked it up? Moving on to the PlayStation 5, and I've decided I'm going to do it. I'm going to bite the proverbial bullet and finally pick up Battlefield 2042 for the PlayStation 5, because I played a little bit of this on Xbox Games Pass, and with the patches and just general life improvements they've made to this game, I think now it's definitely worth £8. Couple of friends online, great fun. While small, the Brixton branch of CEX did have some pretty decent titles for the OG Xbox. Games that I don't see very often, so it just goes to show, even though it's a small section, and in general the store doesn't have any fantastic retro, when it comes to OG Xbox games, they actually had a fairly decent selection, including the Warriors, which is, I think, one of the best Rockstar games no one talks about. Onto the Xbox 360, and here is a game which I think is going to get more expensive in the future, because it's the only way to play some of the amazing DLC for this game is the Ultimate Sith edition of Star Wars The Force Unleashed. It may be £7 more than the standard game, but it's the only way to play some of these DLCs. And here is a game I'm definitely picking up, never heard of it, but £2, Universe at War, made by Westwood, who made the amazing Command & Conquer games back on the PS1 in the early PC days. Yes, £2, definitely grabbing this. Now here is a section I don't very often check in CEX, just because as a rule of thumb I find their Switch prices overpriced, but sometimes you can get some of the rarer games in here, like Cobra Kai 2. This is a game which I think, because of its kind of cult aspect and following, it's going to get really hard to find in following years, so I'm going to grab it today. And one last grab before we left CEX in Brixton, there was a collector's edition up here on the wall behind the till, which for the price I couldn't resist picking up. But you'll have to see what that is back in the games room. One more CEX to go. The final CEX store this time was Elephant and Castle, and straight away this store had a strong window game. Looking in the window, he had a copy of Marvel Zombies, which looks to be an incredible tabletop game, which I actually missed out on Kickstarter. And for £90, I was actually really tempted. Now this was listed as like C grade condition. I don't know if it's because the figures were painted, but they were painted to a really high standard. So it turned out all of the retro in this area in London was in this CEX store. As soon as I came to the glass window of dreams, it was stacked with retro. We've got Evil Dead Regeneration, Resident Evil 2, this absolutely incredible copy of Micro Machines 64 Turbo, boxed and complete for £30 is an absolute bargain, and this thing was in absolutely incredible condition. And that was the same could be said for all of the retro in here. It's in such nice condition. It's just something you love to see in CEX. CIB Mint N64 games are something I'm always looking for, because it's just getting harder and harder to find them, and this can be said for a lot of retro games. I'm always on the lookout, as I said earlier in the video, for good NES games, but sadly there was nothing that really blew me away here. Some really nice Dreamcast bits, some SNES games, some PS1 games, just a little bit of everything I love about retro game collecting in CX. And here is the thing, it was all in really nice condition, like some really nice N64 pads, a really clean SNES and an absolutely terrible SNES. I imagine if you had both of those in front of you and you picked the yellow one. Some really nice GameCube, some more N64 loose, even some Game Gear games, like some really nice stuff in here. And another game which I've been looking for quite a long while, Street Racer for the Mega Drive. It's only a £10 game, but if I can get this in really nice condition and complete for £10, it's a great find. I was actually really surprised for the size of this store, how much stock they had. But let's get deeper into that stock. Let's jump into the PlayStation 3 section and have a look if anything jumps out this time. It's a reasonable PlayStation 3 section, 2 shelves, but trust me, these are definitely getting smaller. Moving on to the 3DS, and again, another section that's getting smaller, and again, the PS Vita, one of the smallest sections now. Like, what we got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Vita games. And to be honest, there's not a huge selection of PSP games, and these are both consoles, especially the Vita, which I think are going to get super expensive to collect for in the coming years. I was quite tempted to pick up this SmackDown vs. Raw 2011, as, do you know what, these play really well on the PSP. Again, a very small selection of GameCube games down here. Another console which is getting harder to collect for, but there's some games I don't see here very often, such as Sega Soccer Slam. I barely have ever seen that for the GameCube. I've seen it for other consoles, but not for the GameCube. Another game you don't see that often, Freedom Fighters, definitely on my list, but I did pass on it today. And Prince of Persia, the original Prince of Persia for the GameCube. You see this all the time for the PS2 and the OG Xbox, but rarely for the GameCube. Gently perusing the very small Wii U section. Once again, nothing I really needed for the collection, as it's getting very difficult to collect for the Wii U as these sections get smaller and smaller. And then I'm interrupted by my brother, who's found 2 more PlayStation Vita games. Which one of these Need for Speed games would you buy? The £15 one or the £18 one? One thing I love about retro game collecting is you just forget about a game for absolute years, and then suddenly you see it and all the memories come flooding back. I remember borrowing this off a friend about 15 years ago, Viking Battle for Asgard. It's very much a kind of God of War rip-off, but with a Viking skin, but it's a really solid game, and for £1.50 it's definitely worth picking up. It just goes to show, even though I've been collecting for the Xbox 360 since it launched, there's still some absolute bangers I need for the collection, and I don't need this one, but check out Rogue Warrior. Even though this was a fairly small branch of CEX, it did have a reasonably large DVD section and an e-scooter section, quite randomly. I don't really buy many DVDs or even Blu-rays from CEX. I just think if I'm going to pick up things like this, then more likely I'm going to pick them up at car boots or charity shops. I did have a quick peruse of the Blu-ray section and did realise they had an HD DVD section, and yes, I do have a very small HD DVD collection, and I'm a massive fan of TMNT, so I know it's not to everyone's taste. I know it's a really random thing to pick up, but for 75p, I'm picking up this HD DVD. So that was Elephant and Castle, and the last of today's free CEX stores around central London. Once again, it was fantastic to visit London. It was an absolutely incredible weekend. I enjoyed the wrestling, I enjoyed the game convention. Now back to Norwich, back to my local CEX store to see what I can find. And jumping into the PlayStation 4 section, I have said about this in a short video, I think for £4, Rogue Trooper is an absolute bargain for the PlayStation 4. Yes, you can play this on PS2, yes, you can play this on the OG Xbox, but it has a slight graphic, well, slight, it's a full HD graphic update, and for £4, it's a bargain. To finish this week's episode, we are going to the PlayStation 3 section one last time. Now, in my local CEX store, the PlayStation 3 section is now 2 shelves. But let me know in the comments down below how big the PlayStation 3 section is in your local CEX. I think over the coming years, these are only going to get smaller, and now is kind of time to plug a lot of the holes in your PlayStation 3 collection. Be that the exclusives, which are slowly creeping up in price, or the kind of cheap games you can pick up now just while they are cheap. to be honest. Games such as this, Burnout Paradise the Ultimate Box, which includes the Burnout Paradise game and all the DLCs. Especially with games like this, when they have the DLC on the disc, it's just a great way to preserve these DLCs, because at any time these can be delisted and you'll never be able to play it again. I've never seen this game before, Damage Inc. I think my CX did have this in before with the flight stick. I did pass on it then, and I did pass on it today, so I don't really know a lot about it. Dead or Alive Ultimate 5 would have probably been a pickup, but the cover was reprinted, and I will never buy a reprinted cover. This Dishonored Game of the Year edition was a bit tempting, but again, it had a little bit of damage to the cover. It surprises me how many FIFA games still sit around in CEX, and how many copies of God of War and Minecraft, but I guess that is people flipping them in. But here's a game I haven't played before, and I do enjoy a good MMA game, EA Sports MMA, and for £1.50, yeah, I'm going to pick that one up. My Sims Sky Heroes, might pass on that one even for £2. And yeah, just gently flicking through these, seeing what we can find. Obviously I have the Resistance games already. One series I do need to plug the gaps in my collection is Ratchet and Clank. I just couldn't remember there and then which games I needed for this collection. I am actually playing for the newest Ratchet and Clank on PlayStation 5 at the minute, and I just think it's kind of one of the unsung heroes of the PlayStation. Like, a lot of people always see kind of more Crash Bandicoot as being the official mascot of PlayStation. I would rather go Ratchet and Clank, but you know, fight in the comments down below. But House of Dead Overkill for the PlayStation 3 is one of the greatest light gun games of all time, and I think still to this day has the record for the most swearing in a game. Here it is then, the last of the PlayStation 3 section here in my local CEX, and you may notice I'm not picking up a lot of these games. That's because a lot of these games I already have on the Xbox 360, so I already have a way to play a lot of these games that were released on multiple consoles, and for me it's all about preservation, and I can already play them. One thing I will talk about when we go back to the games room is steelbooks in CEX, because recently I discovered something and it absolutely blew my mind, and to be honest, I think it could be the start of something very big. This had been an absolutely amazing weekend. 3 brand new CEX stores crossed off the list. Let's check the pickups. Here we are then, back in the games room after an absolutely amazing weekend in London. Of course, it wasn't just about hitting up the crazy world of CX. We also went to WWE SmackDown, WWE Money in the Bank, and also the London gaming market. It was an absolutely amazing weekend, and even better, I managed to pick up some awesome pickups from CEX for the collection. Unfortunately, from the first CX store we visited in Stratford, I only have one pickup, and unfortunately it is not Marvel vs. Capcom 2 for the original Xbox, because unfortunately it did not have a manual, which I am kind of gutted about. I was so on the fence as to whether to pick that game up anyway, because for the price it is in CX, it's a pretty good price, but for me, I had to kind of stick to my guns and just skip it because it didn't have the manual. But let me know in the comments down below if you would have picked it up even though it didn't have a manual. But fear not, I did still manage to pick up a bit of a banger while I was in there. A £5 PlayStation 5 game. It is this game, Endzone A World Apart Survivor Edition, which includes the main game and the official expansion, Prosperity. Now I have de-stickered this one so you can kind of see it a little bit more. Now this looks super cool. It kind of looks like, imagine Sim City but after nuclear fallout. It's like kind of Sim Fallout, let's go with. This looks very similar to another game which at the moment I forget the name of, but I'm all about those kind of post-apocalyptic survival games. So for £5 for a PS5 game, I'll kind of take the gamble. Speaking of taking a gamble, the next CEX store we visited was Brixton, which unfortunately without a doubt had the worst selection of retro I've ever seen, or more not seen, in a CEX store. This is one of the things about CEX. You'll go in, sometimes they'll have everything, and unfortunately, like this time, they will have nothing, but I still managed to pick up some cool bits from this store regardless. And again, speaking of a gamble, I went for a game which I've been on the fence about for ages, but it's dropped to a price I am happy to pay. Battlefield 2042 for £8. Now, I feel like I can get £8 worth of value out of this game. Word of warning, I didn't realise this. I thought you could play against bots offline. You cannot get past the main menu if you do not have PlayStation Plus access. So if you do not have the ability to play online, do not pick up this game at all. It is an absolute waste of time. I know that may sound fairly obvious, but I would like people to know. I am now on PlayStation Network and I have played this online and it's so much better. I know this game's been out nearly 2 years now, but the improvement in this game is amazing. I found this out playing it for Xbox Games Pass, but playing this on the Xbox One only has 32 players online. The 64 players online on the PlayStation 5 make this absolute mad chaos carnage worth it for £8. Battlefield 2042 is the exact reason that it's very rare these days that I pre-order a game. Remember, when this game first came out, it was $69.99 and it was an absolute mess. But this is the thing, you can buy some of these big first-party games much cheaper if you wait a little while, and normally they'll be better for it. Our next pickup from Brixton is Cobra Kai 2 Dojo Rising. And if you have not seen the Cobra Kai show on Netflix, just trust me, it works. I have no idea why they decided to wait nearly 30 years to kind of make a sequel as such, or a spin-off of The Karate Kid, but it is fantastic. It is proper switch your mind off television. The storylines are so stupid it's unreal. It's well worth checking out. And this game is also well worth checking out, especially for couch co-op. Just imagine Streets of Rage, but with a little bit more karate and all your favourite characters from Cobra Kai. And I think this is a game that didn't get a massive pressing, so I think this is a game I would pick up sooner rather than later, as I think this one could well be a cult classic. There are two main reasons I still love collecting for the Xbox 360. One, it is dirt cheap at the moment. Two, I just keep finding bangers that I never knew existed, I never knew I needed, such as this Universe at War Earth Assault for just £2. This is a new RTS, new, for about 20 years old, from veterans of Westwood Studios. Yes, Westwood Studios, who made the early Command & Conquer games, which are still, to this day, arguably the best RTS games of all time. And for £2, I had to pick this one up. Here we have Sacred 2 Fallen Angel. This is the collector's edition for the PC, and this just looked lonely up on the shelf behind the counter in Brixton. And to be honest, for £2, I think this is well worth picking up. I love big box PC games. I know this does have the DVD copy of the game inside, but as well it has like maps, art books, soundtracks, DVDs. It just has some really cool little extras inside, and to be honest, for £2.50 and the amount of dust it's already collected in CEX, I just wanted to give it a loving home. The final CEX store we visited this time in London was Elephant and Castle. And some of the retro they had in there was absolutely incredible. So, before we go anywhere, firstly, the Micro Machines on the N64 was the French version, which was a real shame. But if you saw that Ocarina of Time for the N64, that was so mint. That was like brand new. My brother actually picked that up for his collection. It is an absolutely amazing piece. But I also managed to pick up some cool bits for the collection. And remember what I said earlier, Xbox 360, it's cheap. There's still bangers for it. Here's another banger, Viking Battle for Asgard, £1.50. This is very much kind of the early God of War rip-off games that came out. Essentially, it's a mix of like God of War and Dynasty Warriors. It's pretty good. It's pretty brutal. And for £1.50, it's worth picking up for the Xbox 360. One thing I love about my collection is how eclectic it is. Mainly it's video games and just general nerd memorabilia, but I pick up some weird things such as this Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2007 HD movie on HD DVD. I just love the Turtles so much. All of the iterations, obviously the 80s cartoons are my favourites. I do have a very, very small, about 30 HD DVD collection, and when I saw this one in CEX for 75p, I just had to pick it up. I did pick up one retro banger though while I was in Elephant and Castle, and it is this game, Street Racer for the Mega Drive. And it goes to show you can still pick up some cheap retro. £10 for a boxed and complete Mega Drive game. And quite amusingly, when I asked the person behind the desk, I was like, what's the condition like? They were like, oh, well, there is some writing on the instruction manual. And I was like, are they codes? And we basically, the two people behind the counter looked up every single code and did confirm, yes, these are the cheat codes for the game. Now, some people may have passed on this because it has got writing on a disc, but for me, it just adds that little something cool about it, and I think it's little touches like this that make this game really special, and one of the reasons I love shopping for old retro. Of course, in every episode of the crazy world of CEX, I always pay a visit to my local CX here in the city of Norwich because everyone loves their local CEX the most. And you may have seen this game in a short recently. I picked up Road Trooper Redux for just £4. Now this is an absolute banger. It was released originally on the PS2, Xbox and PC, but it's just a really solid third-person shooter. I think a lot of people haven't played, and for £4 it's definitely worth checking out. A lot of people who have been watching the crazy world of CX have commented how I don't really look at the PlayStation 3 sections. That's because in my collection I feel I have most of the heavy hitters for the PlayStation 3, but I admit it's always worth checking as you never know when you're going to find some low-key bangers. And I've picked up 3 PlayStation 3 games this time from Norwich, one of which could be the start of something very big, but more of that in a moment. So first up we have EA Sports MMA for just £1.50. This is a franchise I've never played before. I think EA now officially have the UFC license, so it'll be interesting to see what they did with this in the early days of making MMA games. Next up we have Burnout Paradise the Ultimate Box for £3. Now, I'm kind of presuming this disc has all of the DLC on, which in this day and age is an important thing because there was some really good DLC for this game, and it's probably very hard to go back and play this, especially on the PlayStation 3. Yes, you can get this same game for the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 remastered, but it's always good to have different options to play some of this soon to be lost DLC. Our final pickup this time is TCWOC for the PlayStation 3, but this is in an absolutely beautiful conditioned steelbook, and this brings me on to a bit of a revelation. I did not know this, and I may be ruining this for a lot of people, but if CEX have a steelbook game, they will charge the standard price for that game. So if this was like the Blu-ray case version of TCWOC, it would be the same price as this beautiful steelbook. So I have recently been going to CEX and picking up a lot more steelbooks. So expect some very special CEX hunts for steelbooks coming up in the future. There we have it then, folks. That is another episode of the crazy world of CX, and a few more CX stores crossed off that list of hundreds I still have to visit all around the world. But if you enjoyed this episode, hit that like button, subscribe, as you never know when I'll be in your town or city in the next episode of the crazy world of CX. See y'all soon.